What if I told you that the secret to understanding the global economy in 2025 isn't some complex algorithm, but just one single number from each country? We're talking about central bank policy rates. Think of them as the master control for a country's economy. They dictate how much it costs to borrow money, which influences everything from your mortgage rate to the price of your groceries. So, where is the world headed in 2025? Let's take a whirlwind tour of the globe and look at the predicted interest rates. Buckle up, because some of these numbers are going to shock you. Let's start with the economic heavyweights. The United States is projected to have its policy rate sitting around 4.5%. This is a big deal because the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, so what the Fed does ripples across the entire planet. Now, hop across the pond to the European Union. Countries like Germany, France, and Italy are all expected to be harmonized under the European Central Bank's rate of 2.15%. That's significantly lower than the US, suggesting a different approach to managing inflation and growth. And what about the UK? Post-Brexit, they're charting their own course, with a predicted rate of 4%. Over in Asia, China is keeping things relatively low at 3%, trying to stimulate its massive economy. Japan, on the other hand, is making a historic move. For years, they've had negative interest rates, but by 2025, they're predicted to be at a positive 0.5%. It might sound small, but for Japan, it's a monumental shift. Now, let's look at some of the major developing economies, the so-called emerging markets. This is where things get really interesting. India is forecast to be at a solid 5.5%, balancing growth with inflation control. Brazil, a country that has battled high inflation for years, is expected to have a rate of 15%. That's high, but it's actually a decrease from its even higher recent peaks, signaling some success in their fight. Mexico is predicted to be at 7.75%, closely tied to the economic moves of its neighbor, the United States. And Russia, facing a unique set of geopolitical and economic pressures, is forecast to have a very high rate of 18%, reflecting ongoing economic challenges. Okay, now for the real jaw-droppers. Are you ready for this? Some countries are dealing with economic situations that demand extreme measures. Turkey is projected to have an eye-watering policy rate of 43%. This is a direct consequence of their struggle with hyperinflation. The government is essentially making it incredibly expensive to borrow money to try and slam the brakes on soaring prices. It's a tough medicine for the economy. And they're not alone in this high-rate club. Argentina, another country with a long history of economic volatility, is predicted to have a rate of 29%. Egypt is right there with them at 28.25%, and Nigeria at 27.25%. When you see numbers this high, it tells a story of a fierce battle against inflation, currency devaluation, and economic instability. It's a sign that for the average person in these countries, the cost of living and the economic uncertainty are incredibly high. It shows a world in 2025 that is still very much fragmented. On one side, you have the established economies like the US, the UK, and the Eurozone, trying to find that Goldilocks rate. Not too high to kill growth, not too low to let inflation run wild. Their rates, mostly in the 2 to 5% range, look almost tame in comparison. On the other side, you have countries in a full-blown economic fight, using double-digit interest rates as their primary weapon. The massive gap between a 0.5% rate in Japan and a 43% rate in Turkey paints a vivid picture of the diverse economic realities across the globe.